right, if the meeting would please come to order, and as traditional in this committee, please, let's turn off our phones. I was embarrassed this morning in Natural Resources. Mine started ringing, and so that was right during the prayer. That's not good. So to start off, I'd like to ask Representative Laricchia if he would please, you did such a great job in the House. I'd like for you to please, if you would, open us in prayer. You have got connection. I tell you, this is going to be your... This is going to. This is your 4 hours of continuing ed. Go ahead, sir. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we love you. We thank you for this day, and just thank you for the fellowship and the camaraderie and the friends. And Lord, we just pray that you'd bless this time together as we make decisions and do things that would be honoring and pleasing to you. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. We love you, man. Appreciate you so much. For you people who aren't here, you need to watch the broadcast. It's great, man. In the name of the car. All right. Before we start off, do we have any teachers here today? Raise your hands. We always like to recognize our teachers. Let's give our teachers. That's the best part, what we're all about. Any administrators, superintendents, or principals or anything, we like you too. So y'all raise your hands. And anybody, this is your first time being here, your first time being to an education committee. All right. And I'm going to tell you something. We're happy today. We had a nice time yesterday. We met with the state board. We have a great relationship with our Board of Education state board, and a lot of them are here today. So I'd like for them just to stand up and let you people know, because these are the ones that are very important. And we have a new member too, but I'd like them to introduce themselves. Stay up there. We have our chairman, if you'll need you, and have the rest of them introduce themselves. Mr. Chair.
Chair, thank you. Mike Royal, the current chair of the State Board of Education, and happy to have you as well.
You're mine. That's correct. Other three. Right? And your reps are up here too, I can tell. Very good. We appreciate, always glad to have you all here. All right, this time, I want to, committee members, listen to me carefully now, because some of you may have to leave. I just hope you don't. But crossover day is Friday of next week. Every piece of legislation that we need to move must be out by next Tuesday, at the latest possibly Wednesday. So we're going to have a full committee meeting and maybe one subcommittee meeting next week. Try to clear your calendars if you can. Monday, I'm looking for, because we have about 4 pieces of legislation we're going to have to deal with. So members, think about Monday. I hope not Tuesday, but we may have to do something Tuesday. There will be a subcommittee meeting probably Monday or Tuesday also. Representative Casas will talk to you about that in just a few minutes, what they will be. But we want to give everybody an opportunity to have the legislation heard. So be on the alert. I wish I could. And members of the audience, Sheena will send it out as soon as we know where you'll know the meetings will be in the open, but you'll get all this information. If you're not on our mailing list, let us know, because we want to get it to you. So at this time, I'd like to ask Representative Casas if he would please talk about and do our bill assignments. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go ahead with bill assignments. This is a late bloomer, House Bill 16. This is by Representative Waits to revise the provisions on bullying. This bill is being assigned to the Administration and Policy Committee. HB 411 by Representative Clark, the Blue Star Family Scholarship Act. This bill is being assigned to the Innovation and Workforce Development. House Bill 415 to provide designation of nonprofit organizations to govern high school athletics by Representative Chairman Meadows. And this bill is going to be referred to the full committee. House Bill 423 by Representative Stovall to provide use of unused facilities available to state charter schools. This bill is being assigned to the Administration and Policy Subcommittee. House Bill 425 to provide for the administration of standardized assessments in paper and pencil format upon parental request by Representative Chandler is being assigned to the K-12 subcommittee. HB 430 by Representative Brockway to implement recommendations on the Governor's Education Reform Commission, particularly having to do with charter schools. This is being assigned to the Innovation and Workforce Development Subcommittee. HB 437 by Representative Dickey to recreate the Agricultural Education Advisory Commission. This bill is being referred to the full committee. HR 319 by Representative Epps to impose, levy, and collect a 1% sales tax and use tax for maintenance and operation expenses of local school systems as a constitutional amendment is being referred to the Administration and Policy Subcommittee.
No, that one has been moved to the has been moved. It's been moved from Ways and Means, yeah.
To our
Yeah,
committee.
right.
Very good. House Resolution 354, HR 354 by Representative Kendrick to urge, develop, and provide a list of training materials to increase awareness of mental health issues and disabilities. This is a resolution from a previous bill. This is being assigned to the Early Learning and K-12 Subcommittee. And finally, Senate Bill 3 by Senator Tippins, creating opportunities needed now to expand credentialed training. The CONNECT Act is being referred to the Innovation and Workforce Development Subcommittee. And those are all the assignments so far.
All right. Talk to Buddy Epps. Bob Epps. What was that?
That is House Resolution 319.
All right, that was one I was creating. That House resolution, I want you to get that and look at it. We're going to have a very lively and interesting hearing after crossover day on that one. That's one that during our hearings we had this summer, as we traveled around, we had a lot of superintendents and board members who requested this and some that didn't. So we're going to have a lively hearing on that after crossover day. We want to hear it. That's what we're after. So that's why I was questioning Courtney here with it. But that's what we want to do there. So that's great. That's Bubba Epps, right? Representative Epps. All right. Is that it?
That's all the assignments, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Chandler, I think you have an announcement about a subcommittee meeting. Is that correct? All right. And your number? All right.
The Early Learning and K-12 Subcommittee will meet immediately upon adjournment, and we will take up 2 bills, hopefully quickly, today.
2 bills, and what are they?
They are, now I
That-
ought
what
to
is-
know since I made
Well,
a
she's got
mess
it here.
earlier. 230, what's the recess bill?
273 and
73, and also 425.
425. Okay, will be heard here immediately after we adjourn. Okay. All right. Any questions about the bill assignments and committee assignments? All right. I encourage all committee members, if you could, to attend all these subcommittee meetings, and because you remember, we hear the bills there when they come in. We don't take any testimony, but we go ahead and take action here. All right. Anything else? If not, let's get on with the agenda. Representative Dickey, we're always glad to have you here, and you become a permanent fixture. I'm going to make you a full member of this committee. I'm just glad to have you.
Appreciate that honor. It would be great. I appreciate the privilege to come back for this committee.
Right.
And today I would like to bring back to you HB 114 to substitute LC 336966S.
Does everybody have that now?
Well, I know this committee is very familiar with Move On When Ready, and that's what this bill concerns. And I would refer you to the bill, and I've got information if anybody needs about Move On When Ready, anything you would want to know about the program. But I know this committee is very supportive of the program. I think of all of us here are very supportive of that. It's been very successful. It's received full funding for high schools as well as our other institutions that teach these courses. And if you would turn the bill over and look on line 49, And we've got 4 or 5 lines there that are the changes to this bill. And all we're asking is very simply in this bill to do not exclude high school students who are taking these dual enrollment courses under Move On When Ready from being considered for valedictorian or salutatorian. That's really all we're doing with this bill. And due to some other concerns that we heard, we did add on line 52, we put provided. However, that this shall not apply to high school students who move into the local school system after his or her sophomore year and has not taken any courses on site at that particular eligible high school. So we did put an exception in there, and this bill really does give local school systems flexibility on valedictorian and salutatorian. They can still have other criteria that they so deem. They can weight courses taken on campus or off campus in whatever ways they may choose to be. It does not hamstring them in that way. So I think this thing does keep the local decision, but just we did not really thought it was wise to arbitrarily exclude these Move On When Ready students from these two high honors that so many students work so hard wherever they might be taking courses, and just wanted them considered. So that's really all this bill does. It's that straightforward.
Isn't it true that we discussed this quite extensively in 2 hearings, and that the committee asked that this substitute be done and this language be added? And what we've done, we've done that, cleaned it up, and we're allowing them to do it. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
right.
Thank you very much for the help.
I have no questions at this time. Do I have a motion? I have a motion and a second. All right, any other discussion? No discussion, I see none. So all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, I have, it's one negative note that they be recorded, please. Congratulations, your bill is in rules. It will be, probably get in there, be able to call for it Monday probably, because we'll try to get it in there tonight. Or first
Thank you,
thing in the
Mr.
morning.
Chairman. Thank you, committee.
And I hope you'll stay with us.
I am. I'm planning on it.
All right, good. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask if he would, if Representative Chairman Kevin Tanner would come down. And now, you have in your folder his bill, House Bill 338, substitute LC 336951S. This has been mailed out to everyone. I hope you got it. I'll tell you, they have been working. I mean, this is called burning the midnight oil, way after midnight. And Betsy, we sure do appreciate you, and we'll let you go to sleep tonight, we hope. All you've done on this thing. So, Chairman Tanner, if you would come forward and talk to us about the changes that were made in this bill. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we are at LC 6951S. In front of you should have that substitute. And I do want, before I get started, to thank Betsy and Legislative Council, because we have been through, in the last several months, many variations of this bill, and she's been very patient to work with not only me but others, and to also help us understand sometimes the legal challenges that are involved in developing education policy. And she's got a great deal of experience in that area and does an outstanding job for the House, the Senate, and this committee. So I appreciate her efforts, and also the chairman and others on the committee, both in the majority and minority party, that's worked on this with us. I also appreciate, Mr. Chairman, the leadership we've received from the various groups representing the education communities. They've been very gracious. We've not always agreed on every point, but they've always been willing to sit down and work with us, and we've had dozens and dozens of meetings with teachers and leaders across the state, and I appreciate their willingness to try to work with us to get this piece of legislation where it is today. I'm just going to walk through. We had about a 3-hour hearing on this bill, I think, Mr. Chairman, last time in full committee, so I'm just going to walk through the changes from the time you saw it before with you, and then be happy to answer any questions. One of the things we did right there in line 2 is lowest instead of low. We wanted to make sure to be as clear as we can what schools we're talking about. So throughout this, you're going to see the word low changed to lowest performing schools. You also see that at several places here that we're making it very clear that this Chief Turnaround Officer will work with and consult with the state school superintendent, and that's found in lines 4 and 5. And then going on over into lines 26 through 29, this is the position being created, and the state board, after consulting with the state school superintendent and also after consulting with the Education Turnaround Advisory Council, which is created as part of this legislation, which, as you'll recall, the committee members is made up of various educational leaders representing the different entities around the state. So they're, after consulting with them, they would employ this chief turnaround officer. We also changed a couple of things in the experience category. One of the things we had in number 1 was a minimum of 15 years of experience. There was some thought on various sides of that issue that should be lowered to 10, which it was. There was some talk about a lot of people who are getting into the education field, and we have a lot of great teachers, and I've met some of these folks, and matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the incoming president of Page was in a different field and went back to school and got her teaching certificate. So instead of holding advanced degree specifically in K-12 education, we say holds an advanced degree. One of the things that I think is extremely important to this bill is number 3, which has not changed, has held the position of a principal or higher in a public school system for a minimum of 3 years. I think that's important if you're going to go in and turn around one of these schools. And then, of course, extensive experience in turning around failing schools and other experiences and qualifications as determined. And then going on down, keeping with those same changes, Mr. Chairman, changing the word low to lowest. There was some conversation about the term "and shall have such other duties as designated by the State Board of Education." We took that out. So the only job of this chief turnaround is shall to manage and oversee a system of supports and assistance for the lowest performing schools identified as in the greatest need of assistance, period. So that's the job of this chief turnaround officer. They are not to do other things. Again, going on down, the chief turnaround officer shall recommend individuals for the turnaround coaches that we talk about after consulting with the state school superintendent, again, including his or her involvement in this process, I think is important. And then a lot of changes starting on line 62. That whole section from 62 down to line 95 is new. This came at a recommendation of several individuals in talking with members of the Department of Education and talking with members of the minority party and talking with members of the education community. There was some things that we wanted to make clear that this turnaround coach would do. And one of the things that we want them to do is assess, once they're assigned to a school and that school has amended their contract, we want them to go in and assess those students as quickly as possible. Then you have in line 67, screen all students during the first 60 instructional days of a school year that contract's been amended. And that's to include but not limited to reading development, comprehension, physical health, mental health, access to the internet or other auxiliary supports, to go out of school learning activities expected of the out-of-school learning activities expected of students, and the evaluation of all available records to address non-academic barriers to learning in the lowest performing schools. Again, we know there are a lot of external factors, and we want to make it clear that this turnaround coach is going to be looking at those. It goes on to talk about that they will provide students who have been identified as low performing with academic support and enrichment activities across or access to programs to promote parental involvement, access to supports for addressing and improving mental and physical health, access to a learning resource center for students and guardians to strengthen the academic supports, positive behavioral interventions and supports, access to expert supports, which may include but not limited to data scientists, psychometric personnel, curriculum specialists, learning theorists, and special educators to help advise the schools on technical learning matters. Then going on into line 82, this is the section that, and I won't read it verbatim, but I had a meeting with the governor and talked about the Chairman Coleman's legislation, which I believe Chairman Coleman is on the floor tomorrow, which establishes a tax credit of $7 million for the first several years. That money is dedicated to these low-performing schools so that the turnaround coach, the CTO, and the Governor's Office of Student Achievement can use those funds to create programs in these schools along with the schools. But also, we know that's going to take a little time to get up. So I talked to the governor about including language in this legislation that set up a grant fund to help the schools that are identified that are low performing, the lowest performing schools that we're working with. If there's a program that the school feels they need to implement, if it's a reading recovery program, a different type of program depending on the school, then if that chief turnaround officer agrees that that would be beneficial, then they send that request to the director of the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, and they can approve that request, and that grant can be sent down to the school. The idea here is that we will create an atmosphere where new and innovative programs or best practice programs are tried in these lowest performing schools. We can show that they work, and statistically we can bring that information back to the General Assembly in the future, and that may be something that we want to fund system-wide or in all of our low-performing schools. But again, it'll be data-driven, and it'll be proven once good leadership is in place from the state and the local community, so that we have buy-in from the school has to be interested in doing this. The CTO signs off, and then ultimately the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, but there'll be funding set aside for that purpose. The turnaround coaches, going on into line 97, the turnaround officer, in conjunction with the Department of Education and the Office of Student Achievement, shall identify the lowest performing schools that are deemed in the greatest need of assistance based on, and you'll notice that I'm very careful when I'm speaking not to use the word failing school. I'm very careful in writing this legislation not to use the word failing school. But here it says chronically failing schools list published annually by the Office of Student Achievement, including scores and data trends, because that is the name of the report. So that's why it's listed that way in this legislation. This is the report that's published annually. One of the things that we're pointing out here, and this is from some conversations with some superintendents that are doing a lot of things currently in their systems to turn their schools around, they want to make sure that we're not only looking at that one snapshot in time, but that we're looking at the trend data. So if they're working with their schools, they're improving their school, and those numbers are starting to come up, even though they may still be one of the lowest performing, then we want to let them keep working and leave them alone to continue to do that, and that's why we included that language. With three exceptions, and that would be proximity to a school in the greatest need. The idea there is if we're working with Tanner Elementary School and it's in the greatest need of assistance, and down the road 2 miles there may be a middle school that is maybe up on the list 5 or 6 or 7 up from that school that we're working with, we may want to go ahead and work with that just because of the proximity. And the other reason would be if half or more of the schools in a school district are low performing, because we know through in this legislation if that happens for a 5-year period or more, then the school board could be subject to removal. So we want to be able, if we've got a scenario like that starting, we want to be able to go in and start working with that system, because that tolls that time and we can start helping those schools turn those schools around. And then if someone requests, if the local Board of Education requests help, then the Chief Turnaround Officer could consider that along with the State Department of Education, and they could come in and work with that school. And I think that's a real possibility once this program is up and running and they see that it does work and they see that the intentions are what we're saying that they are, they may ask for that assistance. 110 through 113, this again is just making it clear that the Chief Turnaround Officer will work with the Department of Education, the Department of Education staff, and the state school superintendent in identifying and determining how many of these schools they'll be able to work with, and IDing those schools and looking at the available resources that they have available through the Department of Education to work with these school systems. Going down line 121, this was at one of the superintendents I spoke with suggested a couple of things, and this was one of them, that there always needed to be some time frames, because if we left that out, then that could be open for someone's interpretation. And we just say that once the Chief Turnaround Officer in the Department of Education, in conjunction with State School Superintendent, determines that this is a school that's been identified as the lowest performing school, and they're going to work with that school or want to work with that school, and they approach them with a proposed amended contract, that there's a 60-day period they have to consider that contract, whether they want to execute it or not execute it. And then over in line 142, 143, this is dealing with the third party that can be hired to assist with the evaluation. And again, this is some language that's been added there is based on available funding and resources and after consulting with the Department of Education and the state school superintendent. And also going on down line 149, talking about doing that request for proposals on an annual basis to identify those third parties. We had not had included in that the Education Turnaround Council. We wanted them included so that they were able to provide input into this process when we're identifying the companies and groups that might be able to assist with that third-party evaluation of the low-performing schools. And then down on 167 and 168, this is the area we're really trying to tighten the language down. This is when it gets to the 2-year mark, and it says after 2 years of implementing the plan, the school is not improving as determined by the Chief Turnaround Officer. We put in based on the terms of the amended contract, amended charter, or the intervention contracts. So we wanted to make it clear that it was based back on that contract, the amended contract that the school signed. And then it goes on to down on line 171, taking into consideration the substantial compliance of the school in the implementation of the intensive school improvement plan. Again, that suggestion came from one of our minority members who wanted to try to really drill down on the intent that all of us, I think, have, is if the school is working with us, we recognize they're not going to have improvement, at least not substantial improvement in 2 years, but getting it geared toward cooperation. We're working in partnership to get better, and that's what we're doing there. Line 182 and 181, we have it had in there that implementation of state charter school through the designation of the state board. They don't designate charter schools. That's actually done by the Charter Schools Commission, so we put the code section in there that relates to. And then 201 through 203 talks about any other interventions. That gave some people some pause, so we added in accordance with the amended contract, amended charter intervention contract. Everything goes back to the contract, into the flexibility contract. And then on 206 through 215, again, this deals with the time frame.
I apologize. When we ran these copies, we didn't check them, and some of the lines did not print on the bottom. So if you, I just noticed that. So it's not a lot, just a couple. So keep on your number, the Kevin's numbers. But I apologize for that error. But we just noticed that. Okay, they did not print. Okay, I'm sorry for that. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just so make it clear, I did not print these because
That was not Chairman Tanner's.
I do not want any conspiracy theories.
No, it's not. That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
I
Did
did
not
not
do that on
print
purpose.
these.
That's
All
right.
right.
Okay.
You just never know, Mr. Chairman.
Hold it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, actually, I think his line numbers are referencing a compare document, so you should have all the language.
Good. But stand up and say that. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's, I think Representative Tanner is using a compare document, which kind of makes the line numbers off, so.
So that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably the case.
Okay.
I have a comparison.
So we're okay then. Okay. But we
I
did
have-
have some missing down at the bottom. I noticed that.
Well, so this may be my fault, Mr. Chairman, but this is what I'm going by is a document I have that shows the changes,
Good.
so I could quickly recognize them.
Because we go from 198.
I'll try to just go by section so it'll be easier for you to follow along.
Yeah.
You have a section that talks about if the chief turnaround officer, after the 2 years, and if the school's not cooperating and they start making requests to the school and saying, at this point, you've got to implement X, the school, as we talked about before, they have an appeal to the state board. We put language in there to make it clear that if they're going to appeal, that's done within 30 days. And then the state board shall make a determination, have a hearing and make a determination within 60 days. So again, suggestion of one of the superintendents we talked to, anytime you have an issue like that, you need to nail down a time frame so it's not left up to interpretation or just doesn't hang out there. Going on down in the section talking about the creation of the Education Turnaround Advisory Council, this language that we added includes the Education Turnaround Advisory Council may also provide recommendations and input on the request for proposals process conducted by the state board about the third parties. Again, prior to this update, we didn't have the Education Advisory Council involved in that process. We thought it would be important to have their input in who those providers would be and giving advice on how to go about that process. So that's been added in. We also added in on who was on the Education Advisory Council. We added in a number 5, which is Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders. That's been added since you saw this legislation the last time. Also, Mr. Chairman.
That's not printed. Yeah, that was not, yeah, number 4. Where is it?
1, 2, 3, and 5.
We have, that's why I say got 1, 2, and 3. 4 did not show up yet. What's 4?
Let me just tell you
because
that
ours did not print. Some of the pages did not print.
I'll just tell you all the members.
Yeah, read 'em.
The members of the Education Advisory Council is the Executive Director of the Georgia School Board Association or his or her designee, the Executive Director of the Georgia School Superintendents Association or his or her designee, the Executive Director of the Professional Association of Georgia Educators or his or her designee, the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Educators or his or her designee, and then the Executive Director of the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders or his or her designee, and then the President of the Georgia Parent Teacher Association.
Good, thank you.
So we tried to get a good cross-section of all those individuals. And then the next section deals with the Joint Study Committee on looking at state accreditation. Again, we talked about this last time. This is only a study committee. It will not be, no force in law other than to study the issue, bring back recommendations. And there's certain members that are appointed, and then some members are automatically on the committee based on their position. And we added a couple there. One is the chairperson of the State Board of Education or his or her designee because they would be involved in this process. The other one we added was the director of the State Charter Schools Commission because if we did create a state accreditation model, then they would also be falling under state accreditation, so that person would also be added. Nothing else has changed in that section. All the other members are still on that study committee. Going over to try to get you to the right location, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, going into Part 2, Section 2-1, B. 2 is 2-1, Part 2, Section 2-1, and then underneath that, Section B. And it's where it's 1/2 or more of the schools in a local district have received an unacceptable rating. This is a section that talks about the board being able to be removed if half of the schools in the district are on the list for 5 years or more. Again, we added that in based on the chronically failing school list published annually. Wanted to make clear what list we were talking about, and again, that is the term used for the list. That's the title of that list. So that's been added in, and then at the request of the School Board Association, who represents the board members, they had asked that and brought up a reasonable good point, I think, that you may have board members who run and say one of the reasons they got elected is because they needed to bring change leadership to that board, and they may have only been on there a short period of time, and it was unfair to consider them to be removed since these schools have been on the list for 5 years. So we, at their request, we added language later on in that section. Let me see if I can direct you to it. It's on down under 2E, I guess if you look at 2E, it says, for the purpose of this code section, an eligible board member of a local board of education shall mean a board member who, and we added language in that says, had served on the local board for at least the immediately preceding 2 years. So they have had to have been on the board longer than 2 years in order to be considered for removal. And again, let me say this again, there's no school district in the entire state that currently falls under this scenario. So there's not a school, according to the Department of Education, that has a district that has half or more of their schools currently on this chronically low-performing list. And then right at the very end of your document under section 2-5, this is the annual report that the state board shall prepare and provide to certain individuals, which include the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, and the House and the chairpersons of both committees of education in the House and Senate. We added in they would also provide it to the Education Turnaround Advisory Council. We just felt like, again, we've got them involved from the very beginning of the process. They need to be able to have the document to keep up with how's this working, so they can give feedback to their members, because they represent the education community, and they can report that back to their members. Now, I will say that any report that we produce like that, this is going to be a public document, but they would get a copy of that sent to them directly. Mr. Chairman, that is the changes in the substitute. Now, I do have something that we worked on that did not get in the substitute that I would also like to talk about, if this is the appropriate time to do that, and then I'd take questions on everything. It's up to you.
I think it'd be appropriate, so I'd ask let me say this, we found this was not published by anyone here. This came out, we picked these bills up from the proper location, so we'll talk about how they were printed. I apologize to members. If there's anything in the printing that bothers you, let us know and we'll correct that. But if you would at this time, distribute the amendment, because that's what you're talking about. So and get somebody to help you where you can get them out quickly.
Yeah, this,
There's
one of
nobody
the,
to help you, I'm sorry.
I'll start talking about it, but one of the things that we've talked about with the governor and others in leadership is, and one of the things I've talked about a lot, is the need to help leadership, and leadership is so important in these school systems. So there's a desire on the part of the governor and others to create a leadership academy, an academy that would be ran in the state, possibly by one of our university systems, that would provide very good, high-quality leadership training for our principals in the state. The amendment that you have before you that I would like for you to consider putting into this legislation actually creates a joint study committee on the establishment of a leadership academy. This would look at how this academy would work, how it would function, how it should operate, what would be important to this academy. And I think this is a great step in the right direction. And I can tell you from conversations on this issue with the governor, he's very committed to being able to fund and to provide a very high-quality leadership academy for the leaders of our local schools. This committee would be made up of 2 members of the House, appointed by the Speaker, 2 members of the Senate, appointed by the President of the Senate. And as you can see, both in the House and in the Senate, one of those members are a member of the minority party. The Commissioner of the Technical College System of Georgia, the Chancellor of the University System, the Executive Director of the Professional Standards Commission, and then the following members appointed by the Governor: 2 local school superintendents, 2 principals, 1 member of the State Board of Education, 1 local Board of Education member, 1 staff member from the Department of Education, and 1 member of the Governor's policy staff. So this is again a leadership academy for principals at the school level. And then, of course, the committee, the normal language that the committee can conduct meetings, it's called by the chairperson, and then they would report back their findings no later than December the 1st to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, Chairman Coleman, and Chairman Tippins in the Senate. And again, this would be for the purpose of considering creating a leadership academy for training leaders in our school system. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, I have questions now, so we're gonna start taking questions, and I'll take you in the order your lights come on. All right, number 3, that's, all right, Representative Carter, Chairman Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Tanner, is it not true that I regularly brag about being an employee of the greatest school system in the state of Georgia?
You do.
And even though I believe that I have the most amazing students in the state of Georgia, I truly believe that the most important part that gives me the greatest joy is having outstanding administrators. And for me and for any teacher, I think that is critical to any school and any school system. So I am very excited about this additional piece and fully support your amendment.
And I believe, didn't I get to meet your principal?
You did.
Yeah, I can see why you
Thank you.
say that she's amazing.
I'm
Makes all the
blessed.
difference in the world.
It
In a
does.
school. Okay, next I have 14. Where are we? All right, Ms. Stovall?
Thank you, Chairman Tanner, for the changes that were made, but I still have two issues with what point in the process that we're identifying the schools and everything, will the parents and community be notified? That's one question. And then the second one is in line 180 of your substitute bill, well, let's see, I'm sorry, 184. I still don't see where there's an appropriate option for parents who are in the school system that end up having a lot of schools that are at an unacceptable rating, them not having an option to be able to not have their kids to attend that school. Thank you.
Thank you for both of those questions. I'll take them in reverse order, but the last one, there hasn't, originally when we had drafts of this legislation, there was language around the idea of the K-12 scholarship to give parents a choice if their child was in a chronically low-performing school for a certain number of years, and they would have the option to take the state portion of the funding and move to a different school, any school they wanted to go to, as long as they were on a list, which in the original draft followed the same language as the special needs scholarship language follows, which means it could be a private school. After a lot of conversations with stakeholders in the public education arena, in the Senate and others, that was taken out, and that has not been put back in. The first part of that is about the parent notification. That's not specifically here, but the contract that's going to have to be, once the chief turnaround officer identifies with the superintendent and with the state superintendent and with the state board, and they present a contract to the local school system, the local school board, then that would have to be voted on and discussed in a public school board meeting at the local level, which would require an advertised agenda and that type of thing under current law. So there would be a public notification, but there's nothing in here that would prevent the local school from going beyond that and having more involvement and more meetings. But there's nothing that would require them to do more than that either in the current draft.
All right, thank you. All right, next was number 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Tanner, I've got a couple of questions on this. On the second page where you got the qualifications of the turnaround officer, has anything been said about what kind of salary we're going to be paying this person?
No, sir, that would be set. We typically don't set staff salaries in the General Assembly. That would be set by the state, by the state board, who hires and all the personnel at the State Department of Education, with the exception of 5, and they would be setting that salary. I would assume that would have to be done based on budget and also based on qualifications and the salary range that they would deem appropriate.
That was my second question. Do you have any idea what this is going to cost?
The governor's office and the budget office has been working with the State Department on that, and they're going to reallocate the necessary funds to make it work.
Who's gonna reallocate?
The governor's office
The governor's office from
and the
whose- from-
budget
From
office.
whose budget?
That'd be a question you have to ask the governor's office.
Okay. Another question on page, line 65. You've got, screen all students during the first 60 instructional days. That's a third of the school year. Wondering why that number is so large. 45 days or even smaller would be, if you're looking to improve school, but you've 60 days, those kids at the end of the 60 days are the ones that are gonna be missing out.
That language was not in, we didn't have that requirement in the original draft at all. That language came from a request by the minority leader, and we put it in. I put that language in the way she requested it. I think 60 days is probably reasonable because there's going to be a lot of other things occurring within the first 60 days of working in this school, because you got to keep in mind we're looking at not only the school itself, but we're looking at wraparound services in the community. They're going to be setting up a collaboration. They're going to be building the rapport with the local leaders. And that's why we recognize this is going to take some time. And we don't want to put a requirement in that may not be able to be met. Doesn't say that it has to take that long, because again, we're hiring professionals for this position. So they're going to go in, I'm sure, and do it as expediently as they can. But we don't want to put something in law that causes them not to handle other issues that may be occurring that needs their attention. So that's the reason it's 60 days.
I just find it unusual that someone that's never been in the classroom is making a recommendation of 60 days. I don't know that I would.
Now, and you realize, Chairman Benton, that this doesn't change anything that's already going on in the school. So we're not, this is extra and above and beyond what normally happens in the school setting.
All right. On line 72, you said provide students that have been identified as low performing with academic support and enrichment activities. Is all this going to be on site?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One other question. Line 196, where you have number 9, operation of the school by a private nonprofit entity pursuant to a request by proposal. I realize it's a nonprofit, but that was one of the sticking points of the last one, was the takeover and operation by another entity other than and I was wondering why you put that in there.
It's in existing law. It's been in law 16 years.
It's not showing as existing law, it's showing as new language.
That's because it also applies to the amended contract, but under the existing contract that 178 schools have out of 180 with the State Department of Education Board, since 2000, that language has been in the law. That is an option that the State Board currently has in place. We did not change those options when they amend the contract. Those same options would still apply in the amended contract. So if you go back and look at existing state law, that's verbatim, and I can refer back to council just for a verification. So again, there's no conspiracy theory on my part. Is that not true? Existing law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 28. I have 3 more questions, and that's it. All right, that's all I see. All right, 3 more questions. 28.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, another light came on. If put your lights on now if you have a question, because I'm gonna stop it. All right, that's it. All right, 28.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You have your question. Yes, ma'am.
I thought
Chairman
you was
Carter.
about to tell me I had
Representative
2.
Carter, yes.
Chairman Tanner, thank you for your patience earlier today, and we had a long, good talk, and we shared our non-negotiables. But I do have a couple things that's in the amendment that I wanted to ask you about. On line 178, number 4 says the implementation of state charter school or a special school was not in the original. And what is a special school?
That's the Charter School Commission has the ability to designate a state charter or a special school. special schools are eligible for additional funding, is my understanding. So is that, am I
It's
saying?
like the special, the emotional, yeah, the different one. Staff school, yeah.
Okay. And
Your second question, Representative Carter.
I did have two questions and a request.
All right.
Okay, in line 187, Representative Stovall has already kind of talked about a couple things, but if a parent chooses to go to a school that's outside of the district, it does say that there is transportation. Well, it states that local school system shall provide transportation. My concern here is, will that local school district still have the option of putting in some type of waiver where they could decide not to provide transportation? I've seen that in my school district, so that's what I'm asking.
This is actually federal law, that if they're a Title I school and they're going to a school, it's not outside the district, it's just outside their, it's not their school, but it's still within the school district.
I understand.
Then the school, under federal law, has to provide transportation if it's a Title I school.
Okay.
So that, again, that's in existing state law also under the current law that was passed in 2000. And that is in compliance with federal law. Again, I'll ask council to confirm that I'm saying that correctly. So it's in compliance.
I just
with
wanted to
federal.
make sure that they didn't have an option to maybe put in a waiver request to eliminate that.
No.
I don't think
Okay.
so. And that, again, that's something that we couldn't change unless the federal government issued some type of waiver.
Okay, and I don't know what's on 199 through 202.
I can read it to you. This is, let me look here. This is 199, you said?
Yes.
Turnaround officer in the State Board of Education for the school in accordance with the amended contract, amended charter, or intervention contract. Before the implementation of any interventions required by the chief turnaround officer pursuant to subsection D of this code section for a school, the local board of education may request an opportunity for a hearing before the state board.
Okay.
So what we added in there was making it clear that that this was in accordance with the amended contract, that if there were other interventions or requirements deemed appropriate by the chief turnaround officer, it was pointing back to that contract the school had.
Okay, and my request, in the Education Turnaround Advisory Council, I think everyone that you have listed to compose of that council has the option of adding his or her designee with the exception of the Georgia Parent Teacher Association. So I'm just asking if you could add his or her designee in there.
Let me find it. What?
That's line, I just lost it. That is actually on line 239.
The reason that we didn't put that there was because that person's the president's actually a teacher, correct? I think.
No.
So the president. Oh, I mean, it's the parent. I'm sorry. It's the parent, where the other organizations are the directors, and if they wanted to designate for instance, I'll give you this is. I'm telling you our thought process.
Okay.
It'd be up to the will of the committee. But the idea there is Georgia School Board Association, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
The executive director is an employee of the School Board Association. So the people who are board members hire that person. If that director and that School Board Association wanted to have their president for that year be this person instead of the director, they could do that because that president may have more direct information because they're out there in the field doing it every day. But the president of Georgia Parent Teacher Association, the purpose of that being here is because that person is a parent, and they're representing an organization that's a parent. So that's the reason. I don't, again, that doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me. It's up to the will of the committee, but that's the thought process behind it.
Okay. And my rationale is with the Georgia PTA president may or may not be a parent. However, they have a legislative person as part of one of their board members. So with having that option, the president could appoint maybe the legislative chair. Just option.
You vote for this.
Yes,
you vote for this House bill. in the committee today, and I will tell you, I would consider that a friendly amendment.
All right. Okay,
I don't-
let's go to number, in the order, we have 3 more, number 10, and no one else. This is it, because I asked you to light up your light if you wanted it, and so I have 3 more. 10,
That's great. I'm only
yeah.
down to one more question.
Senator Lopez?
Yes, Representative Tanner, line 168, where, thank you for adding this language that we discussed during our meeting with a couple of representatives. But it says the idea was to have in writing that if there was substantial compliance and of the implementation of whatever the improvement plan was for that school, that they would not be subject to intervention. And this only suggests in the language taking into consideration, but still with the possibility of they being subjected to it if the consideration was considered, and then it, so just maybe changing those 3 words between taking into consideration something to the effect of, but would not be subject to intervention if substantial compliance of the school and the rest of it was that
I
language.
think that's been my intent. I would defer to
Yes.
council to help us
Council.
make sure that we were covered in that area.
Yeah, it's a little bit of semantics, I guess. If you look at line 171, the very first, even though this is listed under interventions, is really just continuing on the implementation plan. So if they took into consideration the coordination and the compliance of the school system, they could just continue the compliance plan. So I see what you mean, but it's
Right, but that remains optional.
right, absolutely.
Right, and when we discussed that the school would not be subject to the interventions
Right.
if they were substantially compliant.
And that's my intent, so I don't know, again, I'll have to defer to
that
Betsy to
there?
help us craft the correct language for that, but
We'd have to tweak that, 'cause that's
we've had that conversation many times, Betsy and I have, trying to figure that out. Would it satisfy your point is if we said that, if the school is in substantial compliance in the implementation and intensive school improvement plan and has ongoing cooperation, that we will continue implementation of the intensive school improvement plan? And then if not, the other option, you see where I'm going with that thought?
Mm-hmm. Basically moving subsection 1 up, so it,
Putting it in that language, yes, and then having the other options. I mean, I still think you would want to have the option of continue implementation no matter what to the
That's true.
CTO, but including some of the language in subsection 1 up in the language.
Members of the committee, the reason I'm allowing this, let me tell you, this was late coming, and I think you members have the right to, no one had a chance to look at it long. That's why I'm allowing a little lengthy. And I know the others have things you need to do, but stick with us. We're almost there. That's why I'm allowing this conversation.
I think,
I think Betsy, Mr. Chairman. has
Betsy, you have it, okay?
right. So starting on line
Can y'all hear? Okay.
on 168, strike starting from, taking into consideration, we're gonna strike that, and it would say, unless the school is in substantial compliance and with the implementation of the intensive school improvement plan and has exhibited ongoing cooperation and collaboration. You like all that?
just switching out unless for the taken into consideration?
Right, you just might
Okay.
have to rework the rest of the sentence, but yeah, generally.
Okay.
So basically, they would be subject to one or more of the following interventions, which would still include continuation of the plan unless they were in substantial compliance and an ongoing
And on and
cooperation and collaboration.
I think
That
that
would
gets us
seem-
there. I think that gets us clears up the intent.
Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
that
Thank you,
good?
Representative Tanner.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Representative, okay. All right. I said I wasn't going to allow any more. I see another light coming
You-
on.
you
I
keep
will
saying
allow
that.
it. Now, I'm not going to allow, people, I'm telling you, if you want to speak, put your light on, no more. All right? All right, but I'm going to take 24. 24?
All right,
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your great work on this bill. I appreciate all the work that's been put in. Just hopefully 2 quick questions. Going back to line 61, 62-ish, in regards to the assessments and the turnaround coaches, one of the number one things I hear from teachers and students and parents in my district is testing in the classroom, and there's way too much. Is this a one-time test that we'll do to kind of take a snapshot? And if so, is there any existing data that we can pull from so that we're not taking students out of the classroom for testing again?
The idea here is not so much do a standardized test, but it's to look at all the other factors that's going on in that school with that individual student, their mental health, the services being provided them for their mental health, their physical health, looking at their what opportunities they have for out-of-school learning activities, all of the things that may be barriers to a child learning, so that it's not that we're going to go in and give another written test to a child, but it's identifying the barriers to learning in that lowest performing school, so that we can make that part of the student improvement plan and part of that wraparound plan for the external factors in the school. But it's not going in and giving another test.
Okay.
Yes.
Then one more quick question.
Yeah, and I think one thing you've got to remember, you're talking about your lowest performing schools. We're not talking about mandating for the whole state.
Yep.
A lot of other tests. But when they go in there and do that audit, they need to do a thorough audit. If they're having trouble with reading, they need to know maybe a formative test to see where they are, to place the children. So we're talking about that kind of test. Take your second question. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Just a background kind of question. It's just interesting that we have to kind of create this position. Did you find in your research with the Department of Education, was there someone or a group or a person focused already on turning around low-performing schools? What kind of drew the need for kind of creating?
Well, there is in the Department of Education a group that deals with what is it called, Mr. Chairman? It's school improvement. That's right. And they not only focus on the lowest performing, but that we're talking about, but they work with all schools to help them improve performance. The idea here is that we're going in. The DeKalb, I want to give a shout out, some kudos to the DeKalb superintendent for some of the things he's been doing. He's created, I don't remember the exact term he uses, but it's almost like a strike force, where he's got a low performing school and they're going into that school and they're bringing resources and they're working. Gwinnett does the same thing in their schools, where I don't think Gwinnett has any schools on the list, but if one gets close, he brings in the resources, the expertise, and the leadership into that school and the services to keep them from getting on the list. So the idea here is we're developing a group of experts that may be from from somewhere else in the country, nationally searched for experts that have actually turned around these low-performing schools. They have this specific expertise, and in addition to that, that's their only job. They don't have to worry about anything else other than working with these schools, and not only working with the schools, but working with the community and looking at the wraparound services. That's one of the things we hear so much of from educators and others, is that it's not just the school, it's the community, and we have to provide those wraparound services, and we have to identify what those problems are, and then we have to be able to provide the resources necessary. And it's not always more money going, but it may be reallocation of things that the state's doing. For instance, there may be opportunities with the technical college to help come in and provide additional adult learning opportunities for the parents. Now, there may be an opportunity for us through this grant process to provide some additional night and weekend opportunities for tutoring for these students and the parents. So there's a lot of opportunities there that are not currently able to be offered. So this is a very laser-focused opportunity for us to go in, dissect what's wrong, provide leadership, address external factors, and move the ball forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Your question?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, number 28. 28?
I tried not to bring this up.
Oh, you've had, I'm sorry, I'd already called on you one time. I'm going to have you one question.
Yes.
Because I didn't realize it.
Really
Okay.
a statement. With what you just shared with us, and we kind of talked about this, it just seemed like this whole CTO turnaround is in a department that belongs under Department of Education. You don't even have to respond. It just fits.
Right.
It almost like that whole department needs restructuring to do exactly what you're trying to do here. And you know, we've talked about it, but I just had to get that out.
No, and I appreciate that. And this is under the Department of Education. The state board will run this operation. And again, like I've said before, all the employees at the Department of Education are hired, except with the exception of 5, by the state board. They're the ones that can hire and fire the personnel. They set all the policies for the State Department of Education. They're the ones that work with the governor's office on setting the budget, the job descriptions for the State Department of Education. So you need to. It's important to understand that. And you and I have had this conversation, so you already know where I'm at with this. But you know, when I started out on this journey months ago, my original intent was what you said. But through this process, my goal is to improve the lowest performing school, and that child that is in that school that does not have any other options or no other opportunities, that's not getting the same quality education as my children are getting and don't have the same benefits as my child, they deserve better than that. And I feel very strongly that if that's really why we're here, that through all of my meetings, all of my conversations with all the people at the Department of Education, this is the way I feel like it has to be done for us to actually make progress. And that's just the reality of it. And I don't, you know, I'm not saying that to be critical of anyone or anything, but you know, it's time that we put partisan politics aside, we put state versus local issues aside, and we build a collaboration with local educators and actually move this ball forward. And I think this has the framework. Now, is it the silver bullet, and is it everything perfect, and is, you know, we're going to walk out of here today and feel good and we've solved all the education problems? Of course not. Of course not. That's why we got to look at a state accreditation model. That's why we've got to look at a leadership academy. That's why we got to have an education advisory council made up of these leaders to help make sure that this thing stays on the right track. And that's why we're here every year, too, so that we can come back and make changes to legislation if it's not working the way it's intended to. And that's why we have a report that has to be filed. We've had laws on the books for 16 years that have never been used. Never. The General Assembly 16 years ago, and I believe in 2000, wasn't we under the governor at the time?
Right.
Was, so we're a different administration. But they knew that something had to be done, and it's time we start making some progress. And I think this is the way to do it.
Number 20.
Thank you, Mr.
2
Chairman.
more questions.
All right. Chairman Tanner, just a couple of questions on 2 different sections. Going to, I don't have the page number because it's cut off, but lines, where it starts in lines 213, section 20-14-47, which is the Education Turnaround Advisory Council. As best as I understand it, their powers, number 1, is to identify, I guess, assist in the qualifications and manners of selecting the turnaround officer, right? Secondly, to, I guess, conduct also the identification and selection process to serve for turnaround coaches. So you got the turnaround officer and the turnaround coaches. Then I see number 3, which is on line 220. Additionally, the Education Turnaround Advisory Council may submit names of potential candidates for the position of turnaround officer, so they can actually offer names, right? Then we've got number 4, where it says the council may also provide recommendations and input to establish a list of approved third parties that may be retained to assist in the evaluation of schools. What's that?
But we talked about that over in during the conversation concerning once the chief turnaround officer goes in, identifies the school, they go in with the local RESA, they go in with the turnaround coach to do the initial evaluation. If they feel like they need to bring in a third party to assist with the evaluation, they can do that. On an annual basis, the state board would create an RFP process, a public process to accept proposals and qualifications of individuals, companies that were able to provide that service. We want the Education Advisory Council involved in that process as far as giving input in that process of what that should look like, what that RFP should look like, what that process should look like. Once that list is established and voted on in a public meeting of the state board, then if the chief turnaround officer feels like they need to use one of those folks to do that, then they will provide that complete list to the school. The school can evaluate that list or evaluate the qualifications of the folks on it. They can choose who they want to use. If they pick from that list, then the state pays for that third party to assist in that evaluation. If they decide they don't want anyone on that list and they have someone they feel is qualified, then they can offer that person, and that person would have to be approved by the Department of Education, by the chief turnaround officer and the board. You know, one of the people had said during the meeting that spoke last time was they should be able to hire whoever they want. They can. The school can go out and hire anyone they want for anything at any time. But this person's specific purpose is helping the turnaround coach in the school prepare the analysis and ultimately the student improvement plan. So that's what that is.
Okay. And so I guess in conjunction, so you've got third parties and you've explained the process of how that will be approved. Now, it says that they may have other responsibilities assigned by the state board. Was there any discussions as that this advisory council will look into the criteria that is being used to determine what a failing school is?
Well, no. The state board could ask that, but quite frankly, the under current law, the governor's office of student achievement is under law. That makes that determination on an annual basis. Now, like I said in the hearing we had, that's a conversation we may need to have. I think that's and that may be a bill that you'd like to introduce. But currently, that is under current law. The governor's office of student achievement makes that list each year.
That's been talked about.
Okay. Just my final question, Mr. Chairman. In conjunction with the amendment and also with this, with the Joint Study Committee on the state accreditation, and we also have the Joint Study Committee on establishment of leadership academies, or a leadership academy. I was just looking at the dates, and I noticed that the Study Committee on the state accreditation will repeal or abolish the December 31st of 2018, and you have the Leadership Academy Study Committee disbanding December 1st of 2017. Is there any reason why the State Accreditation Study Committee needs an additional year of study?
Well, the reality of that is we're concerned that it may take that long because this is a big issue of trying. Now, it may not. The committee may meet and they may come back and they may have recommendations for us in 6 months. Okay. But in talking with a lot of different individuals, I think there's a strong interest in considering that state accreditation model. But no one has the answer of how that would look, how it would be set up, how it would be run, what factors they would take into account. I would be open to setting that date earlier, but we just wanted to make sure they had time to do a good job.
Well, I think that it would be beneficial because you're getting a report for this Leadership Academy by the end of this year.
Right.
And I think that it would probably be best if we got all the reports at one time.
I would be fine with that change, and I will also tell you that I was going to save this to the end, Mr. Chairman, but I noticed in the proposed amendment to council on line 18, let's see, I believe we have a misnumbering there. Isn't that supposed to be July 1st of 2017? And start the academy.
Start with 18,
That's correct.
that's correct.
That's correct. That's correct. You're right. So there's not a mistake. But I would, Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with having a report back to that study committee, and then if they feel like they need more time, that could be in their recommendation. We could bring that back up in legislation next year to continue it.
That's a critical component. If y'all were here during the last hearing when Sachs was here and we had that discussion, there is a real interest on looking at state accreditation that we had back in the 60s. And the Georgia accreditation, there's a real interest from the schools to look at rejoining that. So that's one thing that we feel is a critical component because of the concern with some of the things with Sachs, okay? Number 11, last question, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me also thank you, Chairman Tanner, for your work you have done, put into this.
I think the spirit of this bill comes through how you are presenting it to many of us, and we appreciate that. And sort of feels like maybe you need to be the chief turnaround officer.
No, it's not me. Not me. I'm just the guy that's going to be the cheerleader, cheering on success.
But no, there's a little humor in there. The thing that I think the place that we found ourselves in right now is you've brought some calm to a rough situation coming off of OSD and some of the things, and we know our schools need some needed help. What I'm hearing coming from my constituency is one of the key components is that on page 6, where we talk about some of the interventions, where we go to number 9, the operation of schools by a private nonprofit entity. If I'm understanding that right, and you and I talked about this, I want to make sure I'm clear on it. Does that mean that worst case scenario, a for-profit entity can take over a school that has been completely failed this course, all the other courses of where we're going? Can these schools end up in the hands of for-profit entities?
It's a nonprofit. On number 9, lines 196, it's the operation of a school by a private nonprofit entity, not a for-profit, but nonprofit.
Okay.
And again, that goes back to what's currently in state law. That's one of the available options currently to the state board.
Right.
And it would still be available under the amended contract. So we did not change or add that in just for this purpose. It's already in existing law. Okay. But it's a private nonprofit entity.
What would that someone else in this field can help me? What does a private nonprofit look like today? Are there any out there?
Mr. Chairman, you may be able to.
Betsy, could you help us out there? What would be like a private nonprofit? Give it on page. What line are we on?
That's
number 9 on line 196.
Number 9 on line 196. Give us an example of a nonprofit that could be doing that what he's talking about.
I don't know who could do that, but a nonprofit would be, the YMCA or anything.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it could be anything. American Red Cross, YMCA. It could be United Way. It could be.
Well, it's probably not going to be
that
United Way, but it is operation.
It's a group
after a proposal issued by the State Board of Education. So the State Board, if they chose to go that route, they would issue a request for proposals. They would seek proposals. Anybody that was in that field that was a nonprofit could submit a proposal. Mm-hmm. The State Board would review that. That would be done in a public setting, and then the State Board could select someone that would be that private nonprofit who was qualified to do that. Again,
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to hear this. Everything there is already in existing law. The State Board of Education could do that now with the Department of Education, could do it now. We've tried to stay within existing law with what we're doing. I mean, they could go in right now, but I'm just going to say they're not doing it. So we're going to see that it's done. In other words, we're trying to go within existing law and get things done that aren't being done. And that's why this is, am I correct, Mr. Chairman?
Well, it's not, what he said's correct, but I want to say this. I don't think,
that's going to
and
happen.
I don't want to speak for the board chairman, but I think he'll back me up on what I'm about to say. The state board, through the debate that has occurred a year ago through the OSD debate, has become more informed and aware of really how much authority they have under current state law. Mm-hmm. And I think that you will see in the near future that they are going to start having and holding schools accountable under their current contracts. Now, the reason I'm here is because that's already all in the law. all of those things we're talking about. But I believe that we need to give schools resources, leadership, and an opportunity to get better with help prior to doing all those things that are already in the law. And I think we owe it to those children to do that, and that's why I'm here. But all of those things can be done today. And again, the state board members are here, the chairman's here, and I've had a lot of conversations with him, and I think he will tell you that accountability is on the way, one way or the other. Either we're going to use the existing state law, or we're going to go with something that has a chance of bringing in the unique set of leadership criteria, the unique set of people, doing the turnaround, doing the wraparound services, and giving these schools an opportunity to work, to get better on their own with help. And that is sustainable. And that's what we got to have as a long-term solution. But accountability is coming.
And you're going to have a chance tomorrow to vote on a piece of legislation that's going to help provide some funds to do this. It's been a problem in the past. We do all this stuff, but we don't provide the what for to do it with. So you're going to have a chance tomorrow to do the companion bill to help this. All right, does that get your question?
It does, and I just want to say again, thank you for the spirit of how you.
I see no other lights. Now, I want to do this. I'm not going to pay people that railroad anything through, but is there anyone that feels you have to ask something? Put your light on right now. Anyone in this committee that feels they must ask a question, go ahead. I mean, I feel free to. I won't take you out behind the woodshed. Come on. Anybody feel they need to ask 2 questions? All right. Okay. Anybody? Okay, I hear none. Okay, so what I've got to have, I'm going to take a motion. The bill's up for adoption. I'm going to take a motion. Listen now, where we're in. We're taking a motion for the bill. We'll take a second. Then we have some amendments that we will take. So right now, I'm entertaining a motion. Representative Carter? I have a motion to do pass. Do I have a second? I have seconds, all that. Very good. Now we have a motion and a second to do pass. Now we have some amendments. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask you to help me. I know you have an amendment, but however, I think there are a couple of other things we want. Now, here's the posture I'm in. I'm going to say that what I want to do, if it's okay with this committee, we're going to take these amendments. We're going to, as I do, completely trust my legislative counsel. We're going to have her take these amendments, we're going to pass them, and we're going to trust that they'll be placed in this bill as we say, and we're going to pass it without coming back. Is that okay with everyone? All right. So, first I have an amendment here that is Amendment 1684-EC. I have that amendment. I also have, anyone else want to offer an amendment? I have 20. He has an amendment, okay?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so this would be amendment this would be amendment 2. Again, I don't have the page number, but it's line 286 of the substitute.
All right.
We'll be changing that date to December 31st, 2017. On line 291, same thing, December 31st, 2017. And on line 298, once again, December 31st, 2017. We had a bit of discussion as to what, if they needed more time, but what we would just do in the next session is reconstitute the study committee if more time is required.
All right. I'm just going to lay these, but I'm going to take some motions on the amendment. All right, do we have anyone else want to offer an amendment? What? Anyone else want to offer an amendment? All right, number 10. You have an amendment?
We're going to have the amendment as, or are we just changing the language on?
That's an amendment. That's an amendment.
That's an amendment, yes.
Yes. Line 168,
168.
striking out taking into consideration and replacing it with unless.
Betsy, you getting this? You got that?
Yeah, it's a little bit more off, yeah, that's.
Yes, okay. Betsy, can you read it?
So I'm gonna start a little earlier, line 166, so it reads, the chief turnaround officer shall require that one or more of the following interventions be implemented at the school unless the school is in substantial compliance with the implementation of the intensive school improvement plan and has exhibited ongoing cooperation and collaboration.
All right, does that get to your,
Yes, it does.
Representative Lopez, all right. Any other amendment? I have 3 amendments now on the table. Anyone else? All right, I'll take them in reverse order. Yeah, she got to go. All right, amendment, the one Betsy just read, do I have a motion? Representative Lopez's amendment, do I have a motion? I have a motion. Second, all right. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, second amendment, Representative Cassis. You heard the 3 dates being changed. All right, the 3 dates being changed. We're changing this to 2017 in the 3 places. Do I have a motion? Motion second? Anybody, any question? All right, all in favor, aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, Representative Tanner's amendment. You see that. We're not going to read the whole thing. You have it before you. Any changes in that? All right, do I have a motion? Motion, do I have a second? I have a second. Matter of fact, I had the motion. Kevin made it. All right, any question? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Now, we have the bill before us. Now what we have House Bill 338, substitute 6951S, all right, as amended. And we are saying that we're going to let Betsy do it, and we're going with what she comes out with, correct? All right, I had a motion and a second. All in favor of the House Bill 338 as substitute as amended, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Unanimous. Thank you. Congratulations, Kevin. I'm going to tell you, let's give Kevin. I've never seen anybody. Yeah, I'm proud.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job. All right, anybody have anything for the order? Thank you for sticking around. Remember, listen for the meeting to be announced Monday or Tuesday or both days. Thank you. All right, Joyce is having her subcommittee now.